Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 83 of the I Rock Knits podcast. My name is Corey Eichelberger, and it is late on a Sunday afternoon. I am recording a little bit early because I have an appointment tomorrow, and I'm going to leave the editing until Monday, and then I will put the podcast up. Thank you all for your kind comments on the last podcast, and thank you so much for going over and buying my Christina hat pattern. It was a big hit at Rhinebeck, and we're going to start off today's podcast episode with some postcards from Rhinebeck. So I'm going to insert them here. A lovely cabin in the woods. This is our view. It's the button lady. Orange, purple, red, pink.
Maybe. Little goats.
Yep. We got really big when we stopped.
So what you would do is take the weight of your fiber and get estimated.
Me? I love this lady who has an advertisement on the back of her backpack for a spinning wheel that's for sale.
So here is the bookstore. Grove. Here's my little area, all my little stuff, and my little orange suitcase. So I took quite a bit of video for all of you to see, and we had a wonderful time. The weather cooperated. It was quite warm on Friday. Saturday brought a huge national weather warning and thunderstorm, and everyone was kind of told to leave the fairgrounds a bit early. The volunteers came around with slips of paper telling everyone that, you know, the tents needed to come down, you needed to pack up and kind of tie down your things, and so we did take off early. We didn't get the rain in Red Hook, which is, I don't know, we were maybe 25 minutes away. The wind that they got in like Socrates, but we did have a big rainstorm. And our cabin in the woods, I will put some, well, you should have seen some video of that too, had a narrow little driveway through some overgrowth. And at the bottom of our driveway, or the first night we came in, was a big hole full of water, and we couldn't go off the track too far because there was overgrowth there. It was a little dicey getting in or out, and I said that is going to just get deeper and deeper if we get a lot of rain. So we headed back and spent time on Saturday evening just in our house together knitting, and ate leftovers that we had gotten from 2 nights before, pizza and pasta, that we ate on the way in, and it was cozy and fine. And then Sunday was cooler. It did get kind of overcast and gloomy in the afternoon on Sunday when I took most of the video, and that was not the case on Friday and Saturday. It was lovely, and the skies were blue and big clouds and little wind, but yeah, the rain did not dampen the festival spirits. I sold 50 books on Book Row, and I had a picture in of the woman who bought the 50th book. I had sold 49, and I was trying to wrap up things early on Sunday afternoon so I could go spend some time with my friends and do just a tiny bit of shopping. And I was kind of packing up, and here she came to buy the 50th book, and I had counted books, and so she was excited and I was excited, and yeah, so that was great. I took 100 books. I would say that the festival was definitely less well attended than in previous years. They did limit capacity on Saturday for tickets, and you know, most of the festival is outside. The barns are open on the end, especially the animal barns are sometimes even open along the sides. And they did spread things out quite a bit. I think you'll have seen in the video that things were fairly spread out. They had spaces between vendors, and everything was marked as one way, so you shouldn't have met people coming the opposite direction. And I would say 90% of people wore masks most of the time. There were people that were unmasked. I took my mask off and held my breath when we took pictures. There are some where it's just dangling from my ear, and then I would put it back on. It's just hard to smile with your eyes when you're trying to take pictures with people. It was a wonderful time. There's nothing like the Hudson River Valley in the fall. If you can appreciate and love nature and the trees turning and the mountains, it's very mountainous. Not like ice-covered, snow-covered peaks, but nothing like what we have where I live on the plains, right? And so just driving for me is an ooh-ah moment, seeing all of the lovely changing of the leaves. So it was lovely to get away. It was a lot of work for me to get ready. I had to have, posters made and postcards made and pack up all my stuff and get it there. I was nerve-wracked about losing that piece of luggage that had all my samples in it. But my travel mates, Amber and Matt and Stacy, were lovely. They were so helpful. They had to be on my schedule. I had to be somewhere at noon on Friday. I was in Christina's booth, and then in the mornings I had to be dropped off earlier than they would have chosen to go, but they were super supportive and just dropped me, and then they went into town to get breakfast and coffee, and I pretty much spent both days just on Book Row. Just if I talked to people, they bought the book. If I wasn't at my table I wasn't making book sales. So that was my goal. I do have books left, and so you can get those on my website. I will ship them out. A soft cover book costs $20 on my website. You go to my shop and you go to soft cover book and it's the only one there. So if you still want a Knit Words book, it has 8 patterns and 10 stories in it. So you don't have to want to knit all the items to still have some stories to read. But it is there. And I've definitely made some sales since I got home. I know that there were people there that didn't want to carry a book home. And so they bought books when they got home. And it is also available as a PDF on Ravelry. I'm going to reminisce. I have a CORI'S stories up front here today because I think it will make you all laugh. I've told my husband and my daughter, neither one of them laughed very hard. So maybe it's not as funny as it was in the moment. But on Friday, I spent about 2 hours at Cakepalooza, which was in a parking lot behind a white dye studio building of cake wool yarn company, dyeing company, and she brought in vendors. So I would say there were maybe 20 or a few less. And they were in the front, down the side, and in the back of this big white building. And Christy Glass did stream that event live, and I think that is still available, that you can still see that event. She went around and talked to different people at the booths. But my hat was debuted in Chelsea Yarn's booth. And so I bought a ticket and was there from noon until about 2 on Friday. And it got warm. It got really warm, and people were shedding their wool sweaters. And Matt had brought, these big cabled wool sweaters, and he had to wear a t-shirt. I mean, it was just really got warm. And we had parked across the street and up about 2 blocks. And you all know I have a bum foot. So we pulled into this parking lot of this building that looked like it was out of business. There was just one car there, and then down there was a warehouse down with tons of parking lot, but most people parked along the street, all the way up this street. And I had to run back to the car to get something as soon as we arrived. I forgot something in the car. And so I went back to the car, and they got in line. And this guy comes out and he goes, "You can't park there." So I said, fine. I wasn't happy because we parked way off to the side of his building, there were no other cars in this parking lot. It would have held, 20 cars, but no one else had parked in there. And so I got in the car, and then I had to drive way up the road to park, because by this time now it's, 10 minutes later, and the line has formed and people are going for their time slot. I ended up parking way up the road. Then I had to hoof it down the hill. And I was wearing my orange toad hollow tunic, my orange boots, and I got in and went straight to the Christina's booth, and we sold out of the gray kits within the first hour that I was there. The gray kits were all gone. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't think there were a couple of them when I got there. I wasn't there for the first time slot. But I got done. We sold tons of kits. And then as I was, they had gone to the car, and they said, "We'll just wait for you in the car. We're done. We're going to try to change our flight schedule a little bit." Our flights had got moved up, so then they wanted to move theirs up. So anyway, I'm walking back to the car, and I got stopped by people, and I was hot. Like, it was almost 80, and I had on this. So I took my tunic off, and I'm carrying it, and I'm walking up this hill, and I'm frustrated because I've had to move the car. And it's quite a ways up this hill, down, and all these cars. But by now, cars have cleared out because our time slot is over. And I see this car up ahead with the car windows down. And so I'm walking up the hill, and I get to our car with the car windows down, and I turn. It's not our car. And I say to this car, "It is so hot. I just want to take all my clothes off." And in this car is a small child and a grandpa who are snoozing in the back seat. And I have now yelled into this car, thinking that it's my car and that my people are sitting there with car windows down. No, they're smart. They have the car running, and they have the air conditioning on. And this man's older gentleman sat bolt upright and just looked at me. I'm not sure he heard everything I said. And I woke the little kid. Super embarrassing, right? Because I have just told him I wanted to take all my clothes off. And I said, sorry, wrong car. Kept walking. 7 cars down, get to mine, get in. They've got the air conditioning on, it feels so good. And then I have to tell them what I've done, that I've just harassed this car. And I'm sure that they were there for the same thing. So their mom, grandma, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend of the people are still at the event, or they've just pulled in and they're just gonna stay in the car and rest. So that was first mistake, foolishness that happened for me. The second funny thing that kind of happened throughout the weekend was this realization that people would come up to me and say, "How are you feeling?" And I had kind of forgotten, because I haven't been out in public and around that, people will recognize you, but that also everyone in the entire realm of my little podcast and my Instagram knows that I've had diarrhea since July. Because I have shared that here. And so people are concerned, and they continually come up to me and say, "Oh, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Are you feeling better?" And it was just like, in that moment, you say to yourself, it might have been better had I just not shared quite so much detail about my illness. So, an update on that. Feeling much better. The Wednesday before I left, I got a double dose of my medication. So she upped my medication, and my mornings have improved incredibly. She is now calling it post-infectious irritable bowel syndrome, with the assumption that I did have C. diff or some type of infection in my bowel that upset the flora of my stomach and everything. And then she said to me, this could take a year for things to get settled down and get back, and I was just like, I can't have that, be like this in the mornings for a year, and it definitely was exacerbated by stress and nervousness about going to Rhinebeck and those kinds of things. So that I kind of have I have a diagnosis. That's what we're calling it. She said, the mega doses of antibiotics that they gave me that I took for 14 days would have really upset things as well. Even though it killed the bad stuff, it also kills the good stuff. And so you got to get lots of probiotic and, she said, stay off kind of fiber, things that will kind of upset your equilibrium. So I got to tell that to everyone. I was not feeling 100% until I got home. So it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday that I took the new dosage. And then Wednesday of this week, I woke up and I was like, I am much better. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Wow, this is definitely helping. And I can stay on that for a while. So there you go. Those are your updates. Let's get a little bit more into the knitting here. What am I wearing today? This is my urban poncho. I wore this on a podcast way back in, I think it was episode. I looked before I came because I don't think I shared it as a sweater of the week. I will put a picture in. This is just a lovely knit. It's basically 2 pieces. It doesn't look like a poncho. It looks like a tunic vest, I would think, more so, and that you just seam together and pick up and put any kind of, this is just a garter stitch. It's kind of leave it like a cowl. It has some pretty good, feels pretty good. So I knit this several years ago. It is seamed on the side, and then I have these pretty square brown buttons. Can you see those? Yeah, you can see them. That I stitched on the front there to kind of stitch that together. It's great for this intermittent weather that we're having now, which is just kind of cool in the mornings and then gets warmer in the afternoons. I could wear a short-sleeved or a long-sleeved t-shirt underneath it, and then eventually I could wear something even warmer like a turtleneck or, a flannel shirt. You could wear something like that underneath it. The pattern is by Kris Basta. It comes in 2 sizes, small, medium, and large, extra large. So it's not greatly sized. The small medium is a 44-inch bust, and the large extra large is a 45-inch bust. So I made the small medium. It's a little snug in the hips, not terrible, but if you want the poncho look, I would have made the bigger size. And it would be super easy to size up because it's basically two rectangles. So all you'd have to do is add on, whatever the gauge is, I would say. So I used Miss Bab's Yowza. It calls for worsted weight, 17 stitches and 24 rows in 4 inches on a size 10 needle, so it worked up really fast. About 925 to 975 yards. Delightful Knit has a unique neckline and permanent buttons at the side that make for a more fitted look. I did not put the buttons at the side. The front and back are knit separately with a few short rows at the shoulder to create a gentle slope. Shoulders are joined with a 3-needle bind-off for a smooth finish. Cowl-style neck is knit in the round after the shoulders are joined, and finally you pick up and knit the edge stitches along the sides of the poncho. The finishing touches are the buttons. Yarn used should be soft and drapey. I like Barocco Remix and Knit Pit Shine, for example. So she even gives you an idea of some yarns that you could use for it. This came out way back in 2012, but I didn't knit it until much later than that. And it's just a great layering piece, so I would highly recommend. I have 2 shawls to share with you today. These are called Sirsa, and they are by Cornelia Tuttle Hamilton. That's a mouthful. She does a lot of designs for Noro, and they're knit out of Noro, and they were published in 2 knitting books. So the first knitting book was called Cornelia Tuttle Hamilton Hand Knitting Collection, book number 2. And that is available on her website, and it's also available on Amazon. There are lots of patterns in that book, all Noro. So if you love Noro, there's a great coat on the cover that I would love it to make sometime. It's a chevron coat, and I've got 2 sweaters quantities of Noro in my stash. So really I like to make that. The second book that it's available in is called Noro, Knit 40 Fabulous Designs and Meet the Man Behind the Legendary Yarns. And so she wrote a little short piece about the man behind Noro yarns, and then she took some of the most popular pattern designs from her other books and gathered them together into this book. So that is also available on Amazon. So you could kind of look through all the project pages and see if there's anything else that you would knit out of these books. I think the one book was like 12 something. I mean, the books are old, and so they're, the pricing is discounted. I'm sure you could find them at some libraries as well as used bookstores in the knitting section, but it is not available as an individual pattern on Ravelry, which is why I don't include it in my shawl class as much, and it's one of the last ones that I'm sharing here on the podcast because it's just not as available as an individual single pattern. However, I really like it. It is knit the long way, back and forth, so your striping becomes vertical, not horizontal. And then you pick up along the edge with this extra yarn, which she calls for, I used a silk solid yarn, and then you knit this ruffle that is reverse stockinette stitch, so the purl side is showing along this whole ruffle, and the ruffle goes along the entire edge. These are the warmest shawls for wearing around your shoulders in the winter. I do like to wear them over a black coat if we're going out somewhere that we're dressed up. It calls for Aran weight yarn, and I did knit mine in Silk Garden. It's 10 stitches and 12 rows to 4 inches on a US 15. I knit it on a 13. Didn't like it to be quite so open, so mine turned out a slight bit smaller. The yarn is held double, and then you edged with Cash Iroha, but that's not what I use. So my information is all on my Ravelry page. I knit one in blue for my mom, and then I never gave it to her. So Mom, if you're ever watching this, you should have this one. I swap back and forth, but she's coming next week, so I will get that into her, because this is the one that I wear more often, and then I have a jewel closure on this one. So they're quite long and not shallow. I'm going to turn one around here. So can you see how deep that is? it would not go down past your hind end. And it does kind of come to this gentle triangular, but it isn't really, it's not pointy at all because you're going this way. You're working from end to end. So, yeah, the Sursa Shawl. I have a recipe this week. We're going to have white chicken chili. I was looking at recipes earlier today. What are we going to have? What are we going to make this week? So this is a white chicken chili recipe by Cooking Classy. I don't have any affiliation with that website. I don't know. But basically, the reason that I like this one is because you blend some of the beans to make it really rich and hearty. So it almost leans toward a stew, as opposed to some chili recipes that can be a little more broth-like, right? They're not super thick. So it's a pound of boneless chicken breast, onion and garlic, olive oil. Then 2 cans of chicken broth, green chilies, cumin, paprika, oregano, coriander, pepper, and then a package of light cream cheese, 1 1/4 cups of fresh corn, and then 2 cans of cannellini beans. And then you separate some of that out and you put the remaining beans, 1/4 cup of the broth, in a food processor or blender or whatever, and you mix that up so that it gets real thick, and you add that in. So with that cream cheese in there, and then that melts, and then also the beans, it's just very hearty. It's very easy. It's another one of those dump recipes. You don't have to spend a lot of time doing prep work up front, and you could certainly put any vegetable of choice in with that. Like if you wanted it to be really hearty, you could add spinach or kale. You could add a different kind of bean. You could add, you could add broccoli to it if you wanted some fiber, anything like that. So, and then it asks for some lime juice and some Monterey Jack cheese and some tortilla chips to put on top. So that is just an easy white chicken chili dump recipe. If you don't have a white chicken chili recipe and would like to try it, this is the time of year. I made chicken noodle soup when I got home from Rhinebeck because I did not have a voice for several days. I lost my voice on Saturday morning. When you're masked and you're talking to people and you're outside and a lot of them are keeping their distance, you're talking louder because you're trying to, enunciate to people. And then I haven't been teaching. So I have not talked for 2 hours or 3 hours at a class for a long time. And around the house, there are days when I say very little, especially not loudly. And so Saturday morning, I was so croaky, very squeaky. And then Sunday, I got very deep. And so then people would come up and then I'd be talking louder and trying harder to push through that. So when I got home Monday, I said, it's chicken noodle soup tomorrow because I need to kind of broth that. And I made enough for us to freeze. I make a huge stew pot and then we freeze soup all winter. So there's nothing better on a Sunday afternoon than saying what are we going to have for supper? Let's just take some frozen stew or soup out of the freezer. So yeah, I made that and we ate that 2 nights this week. We usually skip a night in between. So I made that Sloppy Joe pizza dough roll-up thing again. Gosh, that's good. You just make, it's a Sloppy Joe mixture. It's in the recipe thread on Ravelry. And then you have a refrigerated pizza dough crust, but you could make your own pizza dough. And then you roll it up with cheese sticks in it. Do you remember that one? Yeah, so I made that Wednesday night and it was really good. Yeah, it's quick and easy, and yeah, and we had a little salad with it beforehand. So that was kind of fun. I have a few announcements to make as well, and I'm going to share my Rhinebeck purchases. I don't have too many, but I have been asked to teach at the Madison Knitters Guild, their big event in March. So I will be teaching Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday night I'm doing the Skeins to Skeins trivia game, which I'm going to update a little bit for that. So that starts on Friday, March 11th, and then I'm teaching sweaters and fixing mistakes and 2 other things. I'll let you know. Anyway, I just thought I should mention it for those of you in the upper Midwest area, and any of you that are looking for events to go to. You will have to show proof of vaccination or a recent COVID negative test in order to attend the event. 2 of the events at Rhinebeck, also the Indie Untangled event, had people check in online with whether or not they were vaccinated or had a recent COVID test. Now, that's all self-reporting in that situation. They weren't checking them at the gate, but they were trying to be careful. The Indie Untangled event was open. It was at a horse farm, which I'm so familiar with, had a huge arena. It was beautiful. The grounds were very nice. And then they had like covered concrete platforms with open sides. So everybody was under cover, but all this was open on all 4 sides. So kind of like a picnic area at a park, right? But bigger. And so you felt like, there was a lot of ways to get, and then they had it in 2 separate buildings, and it was a few minute walk in between these buildings down this path. And so they really spread things out. They also limited enrollment. Christina's booth. Chelsea Yarns.
About 110.
Here's the kits or the hat patterns. We're already out of gray. And hat samples. And there's Christina.
No problem. Okay, good.
Checking people out. I am. I'm taking a video because I have a knitting podcast.
Oh.
And so I take people along for the ride. Dark, can you see these? They're lovely. Okay, Indie Untangled, Building 2, but look at this beautiful venue. Oh, the mountains in the backyard. And this is like at a horse show arena. And then the other event is down there. So they said it was a 6-minute walk along this path, but it took about 3 minutes. It just really wasn't far, and everything's super spread out. Open-sided barns, booths are far apart, everyone's masked. So I see events that are trying to get back into hiring teachers and having events for people, but trying to do it in the safest way possible. So I'm assuming that people will wear masks at this event. Unless suddenly our numbers are way down in March and things are looking up for the world at that point. But I did want to, just make that known to people. I will be doing a little bit at Sweater Camp, which is in January, DarnKnitAnyway. And then I am teaching in April out in Colorado for the Interweave event that is out there. So I will give you more information on that as it gets closer. But I will be teaching 2 classes out in Colorado. So that's going to be a little spring getaway for my husband and I. We decided that we would do that. Another thing that I just want to share is that while we were at Rhinebeck, Amber got approached a lot by people. People miss her, they want her to come back, but that's probably not going to happen. And some of you are super kind and just say lovely things, right? Like, we miss you. And then there are those of you who miss her so much that you are being a little demanding. And I need to remind you that it takes a lot to put out a podcast. And when you have a huge following, you also get some negative Nellies. And they are no fun to deal with. And Amber works very hard at their printing company in the fall every year. They are working, 14, 16-hour days. They go back in overnight and run things. This is their busiest time of year. And she went to school all summer. And she's busy. And she's probably not going to come back to podcasting. She has talked about it. But what she is doing is sharing Instagram stories And so if you miss her and you're not on Instagram or you're not following her or looking at her stories, she's sharing her quilting and some of her Rhinebeck stuff right on stories on Instagram, so you can get a little piece of her. But as her friend and as a person who wants to protect people, don't be mean. Don't be demanding. Don't be like, you need to podcast. You need to come back. Because that is not going to help. So that's all I'm going to say. And I would love to have her come back too. But I know what it takes to do it and to come back. And then to have people be negative in your comments, which doesn't happen to me because I don't have as big a following. When you get up into 10 and 20,000 people following you, you're just going to get more of that. And, so if you don't like what you're seeing, unfollow. Don't watch. But don't sit there and watch and then think of things that someone could do better or that you don't like and then comment about it, right? It's not helpful. We are all just out here doing our best, trying to do our best, being true to myself. This is who I am, right? So nobody was out and out rude. I wasn't with them all day Saturday and all day Sunday, but Stacy and Matt were. And I know that they noticed that there were just people who were like, you need to podcast, as opposed to, we really miss you, which would be a much nicer way to hear it, right? So that's all I'm going to say. Sorry, Amber. She has no idea that I'm putting that out there. Okay, let me show you my haul from Rhinebeck, which is quite small. Okay, first things first. Matt made us all bags. So the three of us got dinosaur holiday bags. How quirky are those? He's just such a good sewer. Oh, it's got this denim on the bottom. I was going to put some stuff in mine, and then I decided I would show what was still nice on the podcast. And Amber gave us all little macrame hangers from her niece, who does macrame and has an Etsy shop and is on Instagram. And so I will share that. She is Knots, Knots by Hannah, Hanna, and Hannah has modeled for me. She was the model in the Knitwords book, and so she does macrame and sells it on Etsy. My little macrame rainbow. Isn't it cute? And then I bought the first day on our way into Cakepalooza. We were driving down the road from Red Hook. We have never stayed in Red Hook. We have not ever stayed on that side of the river. And boy, was that more convenient. We've always stayed on the other side of the river. And we're driving along and we come up to this sign and it's the Morehouse Merino farm. So I said, oh my gosh, that was Morehouse Merino. And then as we zipped by in the car, I noticed that there were knitters outside and stuff. And I said, you guys, we should turn around and go see it. And they were all like, what are you talking about? Who's Morehouse Merino? What? And I turned the car around, went back in and pulled in the gate. And sure enough, they were having an event on Friday. And they have a little store right there on their farm. And they had some sheep and they had kits. So I did a whole little walkthrough of that building. So I'm going to put that in here. Their little farm store at Morehouse Merino Farms. Look at all the yarn. Oh my goodness, in this little tiny barn building. Is that crazy or what? A wall of needles. More yarn. More yarn. You didn't need to rate that, did you? And there's Donna again, podcast viewer. And then they have kids, just tons of kids. I mean, it's just awesome. Look at all the kids.
I like their yarn too. I'll be like the Pied Piper.
Giant skeins.
Maybe I should have done it.
And that was super fun. And we talked to them, and I wanted to buy some of their yarn. So I purchased this skein of super nice sport weight. Look at that. It's just lovely. It is, the squish factor on this is incredible. And now I'm wishing I would have bought a Sutter's quantity, but it was the first hour of the first day, right? And these are just my single skeins of stuff, so I don't need any more yarn, right? So I purchased that. And then we went on Friday afternoon. I didn't buy anything at Cakepalooza because I didn't shop, because my time slot was up by the time I got done working at Christina's booth. And that was fine, right? Like, I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this trip because I was trying to make some money on this trip. And I was trying to tell myself, you know, buy very little. And so I just kind of beelined out after our time slot was up and didn't stop. I could have stopped. It wasn't that busy, but I didn't. So we went to the Perfect Blend in Socrates, the yarn store over there. That's where both the Cakepalooza event and the India Untangled event were. And so we went back into town. We were trying to find supper on Friday night, and we went in. And Emma's yarn was there. And so I purchased this set, DK and a mohair, to make the Christina hat for my mom, because she, you know, she's such a blue lover. So I'm going to get that cast on now that I've shown you. I'm going to maybe take that with. We're going out to dinner tonight. I might take that with in the car and knit on it. But so I purchased some of Emma's yarn, and then I met some members of her family and chatted with them, and then everyone, I had to tell them the story of harassing the old man in the car, because that had happened that day, and we were all still laughing about it. So that was lovely to meet them. And the ladies at the Perfect Blend are just lovely. They have, in a small space, well, they've got 2 rooms, but they pack a lot of yarn in there, and they always remember. Mary just came out and she was like, oh, we need to take a picture, and hi, Corey, how are you? And, you know, so kind, just absolutely lovely. I would like to go back there with my book and do a little trunk show sometime. I should have thought of it before I went, but I didn't. It just wasn't even on my radar, because I'm sure that they would have scheduled something for me on Thursday. And then on Sunday, I had about not quite an hour at the end of the day on Sunday. I packed up all my things, and I said I would, you know, just like to go to Miss Babs and Into the World and the Button Lady and whatever we can see. And so I had my suitcase and everything, so we checked that. There is a place where you can check your bags. And I got this skein to make a pair of socks for Ross, because Into the World has the best dye pot colorways, especially for men's socks. I mean, he just loves all these, you know, dark, moody colors. This one is called The Darkest Timeline. So that's lovely. So I got that. And then we went to the button shop, and I was just gonna scan, and I put pictures in of the button lady, but I got these. These are mix and match orange buttons. You know I'm always gonna knit something with orange, right? So I got these, which they're almost all about the same size, so I can mix and match them on I have an upcoming design idea, but I don't know if I'll do that one in orange, the sample. Orange is never the best seller. You need to do blues and purples. But I'll put that on something. And then I found these, which is another mix and match set, which is kind of fun. They're kind of coordinating. I tried to find 2 cards that were fairly similar so I could double up. So I got those. And then I got these. I thought those were really fun. I wish there would have been more. There's only 4 buttons, but it would go great on something like this, you know. So I got 5 things of buttons. That's all I bought. So 4 skeins of yarn and 5 little slips of buttons. And I have plans for the yarn. You know, I have hat and socks planned for most of the yarn, and I'll get those cast on and work on them. Probably Christmas present. So yeah, that was that was a whole lot of fun. I have left the audiobooks for the end this week. So we're doing things in a little bit different order. I'm thinking of some ideas of switching up the podcast and not making it have quite such the same format every single time we go through things. So I'm trying to come up with some ideas and some things that I could do. I'm thinking about doing some live podcasts on Mondays, late in the day. So we'll see if I do that, where we can talk to people about what they're knitting and have people, come on and ask questions, that kind of thing. I may ask Amber to come on the podcast. She's doing a lot of quilting. It would be fun to chat with her once things settle down at work. I'll probably have Matt back. He's knit a bunch more sweaters. But the audiobooks this week, I finished Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown, and it was excellent. So good. Here's the premise. True belonging doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. Social scientist Brene Brown has sparked a global conversation about the experiences that bring meaning to our lives, experiences of courage, vulnerability, love, belonging, shame, and empathy. It was eye-opening. She talks a lot about conversations amongst us now and how we're becoming very divisive as people in a nation, how we're not being good listeners to other points of view. So if you are interested in kind of an uplifting, thought-provoking, easy to listen to audiobook about our brains and how we think and who we are and how it makes us who we are and how we could perhaps be better, I would highly recommend that. Then I read Wolfpack by Abby Wambach, and I had read Glennon Doyle's books, which you all know, so that I decided I probably should read her book. And it was super short, really quick. It's called Wolfpack, How to Come Together, Unleash Our Power, and Change the Game. Based on her inspiring viral 2018 commencement speech to Barnard College's graduates in New York City, best-selling author, two-time Olympic gold medalist, and FIFA World Cup champion Abby Wambach delivers her empowering rally cry for women: unite with their pack and emerge victorious together. She became a champion because of her incredible talent. She became an icon because of her remarkable wisdom as a leader. She created a culture on her team, not just of excellence, but of honor, commitment, resilience, and sisterhood. She helped transform a group of individual women into one of the most successful, powerful, and united wolf packs of all time. In her retirement, Abby's ready to do the same for her new team, All Women Everywhere. And it's empowering. She has like 7 principles, if I remember right. And it goes real quick. It was enlightening. I highly enjoyed it. And then the last one is called Stay With Me, and it is by Ayobami Adebayo, and it is another notable book. It's winning some awards. It was named Best Book of the Year. Some of you may have seen it. It's got an orange cover. It's a celebrated, unforgettable first novel. Shortlisted for the prestigious Women's Prize for Fiction and set in Nigeria, gives voice to both husband and wife as they tell the story of their marriage and the forces that threaten to tear it apart. It is a hard book. Some of it is based on fertility and infidelity. They've been married since they met and fell in love at university. And though many expected Akeen to take several wives, they decided that polygamy is not for them. But 4 years into the marriage, after consulting fertility doctors and healers, trying strange teas and unlikely cures, she's still not pregnant, and she assumes she still has her time until her family arrives on her doorstep with a young woman they introduce as Akeen's second wife. Furious, shocked, and livid with jealousy, she knows the only way to save her marriage is to get pregnant, which she finally does, but at a far greater cost than she could have dared to imagine. So things happen to them. It is eye-opening, and it's not going to be my favorite book of the year. It is a little harder to listen to, a little sadder, culturally so diverse from what we know as far as growing up in Minnesota, and the whole concept of polygamy. but he doesn't want to have a second wife, and the second wife doesn't move in. So it was interesting. I'd give it, 4 stars maybe out of 5, 3.5, something like that. But yeah, so 3 books this week to share with all of you. One more thing that I want to talk about is my newsletter. I send out a newsletter every time I have a new pattern go live, and this last time was no exception. And it's really interesting because I get updates from MailChimp, who most of us send our newsletters out through, and they keep track of how many people click through. And I was shocked at how few people. I have like 1,100 people on my newsletter list, and like 20 people clicked through. Now that doesn't mean that they didn't go over and buy the pattern and use the coupon code on Ravelry, but it just surprised me that so many people bought the Christina hat pattern. And it is certainly lovely if you pay full price, but very few people click through on my newsletter. I spend some time putting them together and writing copy and putting that out there. And this time I got a little update. And usually they come into my promotions folder and I just delete all that stuff, right? I just don't always look at all that. But this time for some reason, I opened the MailChimp email and I was like, wow, that's very few people. Like out of 1,100 people who get my email, very few people click it open, and even fewer people click and go over to Ravelry or Etsy or my website and actually buy the pattern. So that was interesting. It is nice if you do get newsletters from people, if you clip them open once in a while, because it makes the person feel a little better about the fact that they sent something out to you. I can't see, well, I probably could. I don't know. I can't see who clicks. I mean, I suppose you could go into the background of that stuff. I don't care who's clicking it open and who's using the actual. But next podcast, I have another new design coming out. And then 2 weeks after that, I have another 2 more designs coming out. So I've been super busy since I came home. If you have not gone over and checked out Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works, that is Liz, and I'm doing a collaboration for Advent. So if you are a spinner or you just like pretty yarn, she has a spinning mill in Vermont, and she's the one who had the terrible accident and now has reopened with the help of her family. And she will send out 2 bumps of fiber a week for the month of December, and then you'll get you'll kind of spin it up, so you'll get half skeins and full skeins. And then I designed a pattern, cowl pattern. You also get some buttons and I think a bag in that whole kit. So if you're a spinner, but she is also going to dye up the yarn, the wool as yarn. So you're also going to be able to, I think after the fact, because she's got to get these advents already, but purchase the yarns that would go in the kits. I'll have to ask her if they're going to be half skeins, because I held the yarn double. It was spun as DK and it was thick and thin. So I made a cute, fun, easy to knit, learn a new technique thing that will be coming out as part of that kit. And that will be the only way that you can get it for that first month, 30 days, something like that. And then it will be available, on Ravelry and Etsy. But go over and check out Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works, especially if you're a spinner and you would like to gift yourself a really nice present of lots of fiber over the holiday and open up different colorways. The design that I made is not in the colors because we can't give it away ahead of time, right? So she sent me other yarn and other colors, so the pictures won't match what you're getting, so it'll still be a surprise. And then she had someone make buttons, I think ceramic or glass, three 1-inch buttons to go on the design. So it's a full-fledged kit, which is really fun. And then I have the next 2 designs I have are coming out with Knit Style, and that is Sharon, and she is the one who dyed those bright colored mini skeins based on my themes for the podcast. So I had said I needed to do a design with that. And the design I came up with is really fun, but it's going to scare some people. And so they're going to say, I can't knit that, but it is super simple. And as Gigi made it says always, it's not hard, it's just new. You just have to try. You just have to try it. And I had 2 testers finish, and I had 2 testers that aren't finishing. And so I'm a little disappointed that we don't have that ready. So it was supposed to go out in this podcast, but I had to push it back 2 weeks just because we weren't ready. And I've been sick, and so I had to give myself a little grace and say, hey, you know, that's going to come out in 2 weeks, and that'll be fine. It'll be just fine that pattern comes out then. And then I'm giving myself permission to slow down a little and not design in December. I'm going to try to knit for myself. I have been working from the time I get up in the morning and have a little breakfast or not. I go to the computer and then I work until midnight or 1 a.m. I am just on the computer or writing or generating patterns all day, every day, including the weekends. And my husband is a little tired of me constantly lamenting the fact of how far behind I am. So once I get caught up here, I am going to take a little moment, and I haven't taken on any new designs. My next one is not due until March, end of March. So I'm going to just take a little time and slow down a little bit. I put out a lot of designs in 2020 and into 2021 before I got sick. So that's what I have going on. Thank you for all your lovely comments on the podcast last week. I read them all. I tried to heart each one of them so that you know that I read it. I am not commenting back yet. I had to really rest this week. When I wasn't working, I had to rest because I didn't have a voice and I really didn't want to get sick. My ear was plugged from the plane. A lot of the time that we were there, this gland felt plugged, and I never got sick. I didn't have a sore throat. I never had a runny nose. I coughed intermittently because my throat was scratchy and raw, and you do not want to be the person that's coughing on the airplane. Can I just say? Everyone has masks on, and you're sitting in between 2 people, and you're knitting, and you're like trying, you know, you're eating cough drops and trying not to talk. If I didn't talk, I wasn't coughing, but the minute I said anything, then I would have this little cough. And so today's day and age, you do not want to have a cough. Nobody wants to have a cough. That is really, you know. But I have had a few people say that they've never placed a bead on their knitting before. So I am going to provide just a tiny quick tutorial here, just of my hands, showing you how easy using the Superfloss method, which there is a video tutorial in the pattern that takes you through step by step how to place a bead on your knitting, but you will not believe how easy it is. So any of you can knit this Christina hat and add these beads. And there are also links in the pattern to where to purchase the beads. So if you do not want to purchase the kit from Christina, where you get the DK weight yarn, the mohair, and the beads, and you want to just use your own, and you don't have to use mohair, the beads are linked in the pattern to Joann's and Michael's, where you can purchase just a little package of the beads, 8mm beads with a large hole, online, or you can go into the store if you have one local to you and pick your colors. Any 8mm bead with a large hole will work. You don't have to use the pearlized beads. On my orange hat, I used these beads that are faceted, so they have all different flat sides on them, which is really fun. And so any bead will work. You don't have to use mohair. You will have at least half your skein of mohair left over, depending on what yardage of mohair you have, but you will have a lot left over, so you can get 2 hats out of the mohair. But most of you will use most of it of a skein of DK for the adult sized hats, especially if you do the folded brim, because that takes a lot more yarn to do the folded brim. This is the Superfloss. This is what it looks like. It's a piece of floss, and then it has this fuzzy area right here that you can see, and then it has a stiff end. So I have beaded the beads on to the Superfloss. I have knit up to where I want to place my bead. I take the firm end of the floss and I just stick it through the stitch up until where it folds. And then I fold it back on itself and pull that off. As you can see, I can pull it quite tightly. And I just slide a bead up. So I have my beads strung on here, and I just slide it all the way up over that and onto that stitch. Now the bead is on the stitch, and I just squeeze that with my 2 fingers and put it back on the needle. You can leave it there just in case it falls off, and then I just knit that stitch off the end, pull that piece of floss out, and the bead is placed. You can place a bead on knit or purl stitches. It depends on what side of the hat you're working on in the Christina hat pattern, but it's super simple. Any of you can do this. You just buy a piece of super floss. They come in a package like this. Easy peasy. You can also use a crochet hook as long as it can reach through the hole in your bead. So your hole needs to accommodate the DK weight yarn and the mohair. This one has an extra large hole. The pearl beads I used did not have a hole quite this big. Hope that helps.
Until next time, keep it colorful, waddle on, keep your fork. You'll never regret ripping back. Buy the gravy. Love you all. Come in for your hug. I really appreciated those that came up to me at Rhinebeck and said hello and introduced themselves and, bought my book or showed me something that they had knit of mine. That it totally touched my heart. I am such an extrovert, and it filled me up from the tips of my toes to the top of my head. So that was absolutely lovely. Thank you so much. Bye.